Hey guys, welcome to TGS. Today we're going to be looking at the differences between inertia semi-autos and gas semi-autos. For the experiment and demonstration I have this, a Benelli M2 and this, a Winchester SX3, both in 20 bore. Let's have a look at them before we go on. So before we get into any practical differences, I want to look at the technical differences. And to do that, really, we do need to take these apart. So first off, this is a Benelli M2, as I said. It is probably one of the most common inertia systems out there with a rotating bolt head. As you see when I take it apart, there is not many bits in this fore-end placed here. What we need to do also is pull this bolt out here. And as you can see, that's pretty much it, apart from the trigger mechanism and the lifter in there. But, and there's sure there'll be somebody here who tells me off for saying this, but the trigger mechanisms vary from gun to gun quite a bit, but they are not particularly special to the action type itself. So, as you can see, you have a bolt on a bolt carrier, a rat tail tang that goes to a spring inside the stock here. So how one of these works is quite simple. When the bolt comes home, the bolt head actually rotates up into the action, a little bit like a rifle with twin lugs that actually rotate up and in. As you can see, these two lugs here on the front of the bolt face turn as they come in, and that locks it in place. For this gun to disengage from that system, it just takes the recoil to actually bump that off, and it's this locking that gives it that consistent headspace. It takes the recoil, that bumps the bolt away, pulls the bolt head out. Very simple. That flies back inside the action, flies forward, picking up the next cartridge, the bolt head relocks into the action. It says, it does take a little bit of when it's off the gun. That's locked into the action there very, very simply. And all you try as you might from the front, once this is locked in place, it's locked in place without the gun firing, or you pulling the bolt carrier back. Very simple mechanism, extremely simple, just relying on recoil. On the contrary, a gas gun, which we're going to look at here, is the SX3. I was about to say, this is not a particularly simple action. It's taken it's taken 100 years for us to get here. It took us 50 odd years for us to get to this particular inertia action design, and it's very, very good. But a gas gun is a little different. So now when we take the fore end off, you will see there is quite a lot more gubbins underneath it. And that is something that you'll notice between gas guns and inertia guns. Look at the fore end difference in size, depth and width. That is extraordinary, I think. Anyway, not that it really matters, but it is important to sort of note for later conversations about handling and characteristics. And it needs to be that big to house all of this. So if we pull that bolt back, the barrel comes off. This is the gas piston. You take this off, and every gun will be slightly different as well. So just beware that as much as this is a generic thing, they all vary in the way that they cycle. So piston sizes, piston shapes, and such will be slightly different, but the overriding concept is very similar. Let's pull that out. Okay, so that actually does not want to come out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chuck this back together quickly. In the inevitability that I don't want to damage this gun, and it's probably going to take a little bit longer than you guys will want to see for me to figure out what's wrong and why it doesn't want to come apart. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a surrogate auto. Something that in my opinion is probably a slightly better gun than this in a 20 bore, at least. In SX312s are very, very solid, but the SX320s are slightly less so. We have this, a Beretta AL391 Eurica 2 20 bore. So, much the same, front nut off. Sorry to waste your time, but it is interesting to find out what goes wrong with certain guns. And SX3 charging handles. Alright, so we are. Look, a different type of gas piston. It was worth all of that effort. And on this one, instead of on the SX3 we have the floating piston, the connector, sorry, is you have this. And look, This one comes out really easy. Well done, Beretta, for making a good and intelligent design. To make sure the rat tail is disengaged from the hammer, and it comes off thus. So this gas gun, much like many others, is a bit different. So if you look inside here, on all of your gas autos, there are two tiny little ports, two little snake eyes. And if you look down your barrels, you'll see two little holes down there. What happens when you fire the cartridge? You get huge gas expansion, and some of that gas is let out of these two bottom ports. That gas pushes this piston back. This piston goes and connects straight onto here, pushing this back inside the action. Sorry, let me line this up. That'll make life a bit nicer, won't it? So what happens is the piston flies back out of there, down here, pushing this back inside the housing. What is on here that is interesting, that is worth seeing more than anything, and is the important bit about one of these, is how it locks in place. So without the gas, if you take all the gas system out of one of these, what you have, if you see here, the back of that bolt rises. Sometimes it's the back, sometimes it's the front, depending on which gun you're using. But what that does is that locks into this little cutaway here. So once that is locked in place, if I hold this forward and pull this back, the bolt is locked in place. What it needs is the gas, which connects to the bottom part of the bolt here. So what it needs is this to be in there, to drop back, for this to drop down, for that bolt to go. So without the gas, this bolt will stay locked. And that is essentially how these two things work. Both bolts lock in place and are only disengaged when one is pushed by gas and one is pushed by inertia. And then both use that force to cycle and pick up the next cartridge. Fascinating, isn't it? Very simple, but extremely different in their own way. And it's amazing how both have gone both ways. Some guns use a little bit of both, but we're not here today to talk about those. Anyway, let's throw these back together. So there is benefits to both, and every action is slightly different. So what I will say is there will be many generalizations that will be made across the course of this video that are only really specific to the mainstream action designs. So what I will say at this point before I go any further is that this video is kind of pertinent to usual actions of semi-automatics, aka the rotating bolt head inertia gun, which is pretty much this system, which is most famous now on a Benelli, but it's actually, it's a long history I'm not going to go through right now. But you'll find on Breeders, Benellis, Franchies, Stogers, all sorts. So yeah, this is the sort of thing we're talking about today. There are other inertia systems out there that are kind of like this, and there are many gas guns out there, but the most of which will be a gas piston driven system such as this. So let's put that back together. Just make sure you disconnect that ever so slightly. That goes in. And quite simply, you just take the back pressure off of there, lock the bolt back in place, and then front nut on. And there you have your Benelli. Is significantly simpler. All you need to do, drop your bolt back into play, such as that, flip your rat tail tang over, charge and handle in. When I say it's simpler, it's only simpler, well, I suppose it's only simpler because I think it is really more than anything. You do need to put your forend on before doing any more, so sorry about that. Got distracted talking, which is often the way. So you just put your forend on an M2, and that goes on. Every gun will be slightly different on this assembly as well. And front nut on. So that was the technical side. As you can see, both operating systems are slightly different, and as I said, there are many variations on a theme. But most people won't be too worried about that. Most people are worried about things like reliability and handling. So let's talk about those. So let's start with reliability. Most people will say, and I am one of them, that an inertia gun is more reliable. An inertia gun is more reliable than a gas gun. That is kind of a fallacy, for there are gas guns out there. I believe there's a Remy 1100 that did a test, something like 20,000 cartridges without a clean. That's quite substantial. However, it's worth saying that you can shoot something like a Benelli, an inertia gun, in the rain, chuck it away, where it's got hard chrome barrels and it's mostly made of plastic and aluminium, leave it away dirty, bring it out, and it will then serve you perfectly every time. Which is why most keepers use inertia guns. Most gamekeepers use inertia guns, and most people who use a gun for work will use an inertia gun. If you do that with a gas gun, see, not cleaning a gas gun is an option as long as you're using it regularly and only in particularly unadverse conditions. This is because the carbon buildup you get on that piston, you got to think all that dirty gas is actually coming and staying inside the working parts of your gun. Whereas generally, on most guns, they try and get most of it out the front. What this leaves you with after a while is a very hard substance that actually, I've had to chisel off in the past with proper sharp chisels, actually hammering it away to try and get that caked up stuff off. There will come a point that it will just cease working. And that is where the inertia gun gets its legendary reliability, even though it perhaps isn't that much more reliable than the other. Also on the reliability note, if you want a gun that will shoot a more diverse range of cartridges, generally a gas gun is the way to go. Some gas guns come with multiple pistons, and those multiple pistons will be like a light duty and a heavy duty piston. For example, if you have a 3 or 3.5 inch auto, you'll have a heavy piston for shooting your sort of 40 gram plus stuff and a lighter piston for the others. Because, unsurprisingly, in both these guns, they are designed and tuned for a certain size and weight and set of cartridges. So you'll find that most semi-automatics won't like anything less than a 17mm, and most semi-automatics won't like anything less than an ounce, 28 grams. What is also interesting is that Benelli, or at least inertia autos, need tuning. A gas gun generally needs less tuning, so a gas gun will be less cartridge fussy because of the way that it works. Most gun cartridges will be reducing sufficient pressure to actually cycle the load. In fact, some 12-bore autos out there now will cycle 24 grams reliably, and there is in fact autos that are designed for that. But it's also worth stating that I know people who are using certain autos that are tuned for 21 gram cartridges, and they're cycling them every single time through certain gas autos. But that's by the by. An inertia auto is slightly different. Where they are designed for a much more specific type of cartridge, they can be significantly more cartridge fussy. So if you're buying an inertia auto and only putting light loads through it, you do need to start considering tuning your gun to the load that you are putting through it. Potentially, especially if you're buying something like a 3.5 inch auto, which we suffered with the breeder that we reviewed, and then subsequently got back for re-review so that we could make it work with the light cartridges that we were using. So let's look at it from that perspective. More intensive cleaning regime. Even if you clean them the same frequency between the two, it takes roughly twice as long to clean a gas gun as it does an inertia gun. An inertia gun, generally all you need to do is take it out, clean the barrels, clean the bolt, and if you want, pull the trigger unit out and give that a wash out too. With a gas gun, suddenly you've got all this gas working and a whole another section of the gun to clean, and that surprisingly is the hardest section of the gun to clean as well. So yeah, let's put it this way. If you look after your guns, don't be put off of a gas gun. If you don't look after your guns and are going to use it for hard work, buy an inertia gun. Shootability, or handling characteristics more importantly. You won't find many inertia guns on the clay circuit, mostly because they have significantly less weight in them. So you'll end up with a much more erratic swing. What you find where there's no gubbins in the front, you don't even have that huge gas loop on the front there, you have nothing. So you'll end up with a much faster, lighter gun. Also very much more applicable to your pigeon shooters and your vermin shooters. Hence that speed is quite a nice thing. With a gas gun, however, if you're looking for a clay gun, you automatically have a much more substantial unit. I mean, there's just under a pound of difference between these two 20 bores, which is, well, it's not that much, but it's enough. Yeah, this is wood, so there's enough difference between them that it's not a fair comparison. But you'll know that this forend feels deeper. It is longer. That's also because the mag tube is longer, but also because inherently every gas gun's forend is longer because it needs to take up all that gas work. More importantly, they are usually more substantial. This Benelli one is actually made over substantial because if they made it as thin as could be, it would be really pathetic. And there is Benellis out there that have these super thin forends in a 12 bore because they can, which is quite nice. Whereas you'll rarely find a super slimline gas auto. And when you do, they are shaving off the inside and external, so actually it makes for a less hardy composed forend. perhaps doesn't matter in a plastic, but may matter in a wood, especially if you're going to be using it in scenarios where you might damage it. Going back to the main point though, is that extra forehand weight is actually really sweet. So what you're looking for, you get, is a much smoother swing, which is extremely noticeable when you're out on the clay field. And for those of us who like shooting slightly longer stuff or slightly slower stuff, or slightly more calculated stuff, actually that extra forehand weight and that slower speed of gun is quite nice. What that does tend to lend you with though is an extremely front heavy gun. So if you are going to use one of these for any sensible competition and any sort of proper use, a couple of weights in the back doesn't go amiss. And you'll find that actually competition spec versions of this type of gun, gas gun, will come with this extra weight in the back. So you'll end up with an auto that's about, 7.5, 8 pounds, which is a huge amount of weight. Whereas obviously if you're carrying it all day or walking all day as an upland hunting gun or vermin gun, this lightweight machine here is certainly the more sensible option. What you do get though, which is, I suppose, good and bad depending on scenario, is this very quick and erratic speed. And I say erratic can be quite good too. I don't mean it as an insult in any way. So there you go, that's pretty much my breakdown between the two. As long as you look after both and use sensible cartridges in both, or have your gun tuned to the cartridges you want, there should be no reliability difference between them. However, if you're wanting a working gun and something that you can abuse, it's clear the Inertia gun is better. If you're after a gun for the clay shooting circuit, it is also potentially clearer that this is better. Not to say that there aren't some amazing automatic Inertia guns out there for shooting clays. Benelli make a line of heavier guns that actually are probably just as good. But it's, again, worth stating that we're talking about generalizations here, and if you're just going to go and grab the basic one off the shelf, you need to be aware that it may not be cut out for the use that you want. Cue somebody saying, oh, but I've got an M2 and I shoot 100 out of 100 clays with it. You may do, and power to you, but it's not going to be the easiest tool for that job. The final point is recoil. Because of the lighter weight and the way that the operation of the action works, Inertia guns kick more than gas guns, pretty much every time. And as such, if you're recoil sensitive or a new shooter who doesn't want to get beaten about, these can be a great option. At the same time, both autos do reduce recoil over and above what you'd get through an over and under of the same weight. So, what can I say? Both are better than nothing, but if you are recoil sensitive, the gas gun is better. It will also allow you to shoot slightly lighter cartridges than you'd get away with in an Inertia auto without tuning it for those super light cartridges, which is possible. So there you go. We're all over and done with now. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Goodbye. Be excellent to one another. I hope you're safe. And I've tried to talk really slowly in this one, so I hope you appreciate it. Take care, guys.